presence. Bai Lianshuang nodded in response. She knew that she was at fault for raising such a proposal, so she wasn't disgruntled by Nalin Yeshing's forceful demeanor. While it's true that Chen Pingan could spare himself a great deal of trouble by choosing to marry into any other clan on the Sword Qi Great Wall, the fact of the matter is that he's chosen young Mistress Ning, so he has to live with the consequences of that choice, Nalin Yeshing said. He was able to convince us, so it's up to him to convince others as well. If he can't convince them through his words, then he'll just have to do so with his fists. I'm not asking you to help Chen Pingan gain any form of unfair advantage, Bai Lianshuang complained in a sheepish manner. I just want you to go and keep an eye on him in case something happens. It's always better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? A resigned look appeared on Nalin Yeshing's face as he sighed. I made an agreement with Chen Pingan not to tell you the truth, but clearly, I'm never going to hear the end of it from you if I don't. The reason why I haven't gone to keep an eye on things is that Chen Pingan asked me not to. Otherwise, I'd already be there even without your nagging. You think I'm feeling any less anxious and worried than you are? You're telling me young Master Chen asked you not to go? Bai Lianshuang asked in a skeptical manner. Nalin Yeshing nodded in confirmation. That's right. You know that I wouldn't dare to lie to you about something like this. His reasoning was very simple. If none of the seniors of the Ning clan are present, then the Qi clan would feel too ashamed to send any of their senior figures to back up Qishou. He told me that even if he loses his battle against Qishou, he won't lose by much, at least not by enough to make Qishou feel like he actually won. If Qishou dares to break the rules and escalates what should be a sparring match into a battle of life and death, then Chen Pingan would force the old ancestors behind Qishou to come out and clean up his mess. Once that happens, it'll be apparent to everyone that the Qi clan is at fault, and they'll receive widespread condemnation from all directions. Bai Lianshuang fell into deep thought as she carefully mulled over what she had just been told. You and young Mistress Ning are probably unaware of this, but Chen Pingan actually came to speak to me twice in secret, Nalin Yeshing continued. The first time he questioned me extensively about Qishou, Pang Yuanji, and Gao Yeho, asking me about many things including the names of their flying swords, their personalities, their habits in battle, and their Dao mentors. The second time he asked me to spar with him while imitating their flying swords with my own, but he requested that I make my flying sword just a little faster than theirs. Of course I accepted his request. After our sparring matches, he told me that if he were to go all out, then at the very least, he would be able to force those three into battles of life and death, as they wouldn't be able to avoid suffering a defeat unless they also went all out against him. A peculiar look appeared on Bai Lianshuang's face upon hearing this. Are you still worried about Chen Pingan now? Nalin Yeshing asked with a sly grin. Should you not be feeling sympathy for Qishou, Pang Yuanji, and Gao Yeho instead? Unless your cultivation base is far superior, Chen Pingan is just about the worst opponent you could possibly hope to face. You've sparred with him yourself, so I'm sure you're aware of how much physical punishment he can shrug off like it's nothing. Normally, Chen Pingan is a very easygoing and well-mannered kid, but there's another side to him as well. After our sparring matches we had a drink together, and after a few drinks he really started to loosen up a little. He took off his boots and sat cross-legged like me, and there was a gleam in his eyes and an air of confidence in his voice that I bet you can't even imagine. A reminiscent look appeared on Nalin Yeshing's face as he spoke. It had been too long since the Ning Manor had a male owner, and things had become very drab and uninspired as a result. That's young Master Chen to you. Bai Lianshuang snapped with a stern glare. Who are you to be referring to young Master Chen directly by name? Nalin Yeshing fell into a disgruntled silence. It felt like whenever he displayed any joy or excitement, the old hag was always sure to rain on his parade. Do you think young Master Chen will be able to win 3 consecutive battles? Bai Lianshuang asked in a concerned voice. Nalin Yeshing had already prepared a response to this exact question, and he replied, Of course I want that to happen, but if he has to face one of Pang Yuanji, Qishou, or Gao Yeho for his third battle, then it's most likely still going to be quite difficult for him. The likeliest opponent for his third battle will be Qishou, and as long as Qishou doesn't get careless, I think it'll be a very competitive battle indeed between the two. Right at this moment, both of them clearly sensed the almighty aura of an ancient sword sweeping over the street where Dai Zhang's shop was situated. Immediately thereafter, the immortal sword that was sitting on the table in Chen Pingan's room flew out of the Ning Manor on its own. The old woman immediately gave Nalan Yeshing an agitated kick as she urged, "Hurry up and go take a look. That was clearly High Radiance's aura just now." Nalan Yeshing's expression remained unchanged, but internally he was also growing quite concerned. If this were a normal sparring match as opposed to a battle of life and death, then why was there a clash between a celestial sword and a pseudo-celestial sword taking place? With that in mind, Nalan Yeshing was just about to break his agreement with Chen Pingan, but all of a sudden, the script was flipped, and Bai Lianshuang suddenly became the composed one as she said, "Forget it. We should have faith in young Master Chen. I'm sure he already anticipated this. You really don't want me to go take a look?" Nalan Yeshing asked. What he was implying by raising this question was that if something were to go wrong, then Bai Lianshuang would be to blame for telling him not to go, thereby clearing him of all responsibility. "Yes, I'm certain," Bai Lianshuang confirmed with a nod. Nalan Yeshing took a glance at her. "What do you think you're looking at, you old dog?" she immediately snapped. Nalan Yeshing knew that she was not in a good mood at the moment, so he tolerated her outburst. In any case, he had already grown accustomed to this after tolerating her for so many years. A short while later, a golden courtier swordsman flew into the Ning Manor in a hurry, then descended onto the sparring platform, and after extending respectful salutes to his two seniors, he reported, "Chen Pingan has already won 3 battles, and his opponents were Renyi, Puyu, and Qi Shou." The golden courtier swordsman was Cui Wei, and despite his youthful appearance, he was already close to 100 years of age. He was technically an unofficial disciple of Nalan Yeshing's. This was something that Nalan Yeshing had never taken seriously, but Cui Wei had always served Nalan Yeshing with diligence and loyalty. In the wake of the massive calamity that befell the Ning residents, he had also been implicated, and as a result, life had become very difficult for him over the past dozen or so years, but his loyalty to Nalan Yeshing and the Ning clan never wavered. Bai Lianshuang immediately erupted into loud cheers, while Nalan Yeshing asked, "Has Chen Pingan sustained any severe injuries? Why have you come back instead when I asked you to keep an eye on him?" "It looks like there's going to be a 4th battle," Cui Wei replied with an excited smile. "I came back to report the situation, but I can't stay for long. Otherwise, I'm going to miss the battle." Nalan Yeshing grabbed onto Cui Wei's shoulder before the latter could depart, then demanded, "Tell us what happened in those 3 battles. Can I report back to you later, Master?" Cui Wei implored with a wry smile. "The 4th battle is going to be against Peng Yuanji, and Chen Pingan was the one who challenged him. It would be a huge shame to miss it. While on my way back to the Ning Manor, I spotted 2 sword immortal seniors from the northern complete reed continent flying onto the scene." "What happened with High Radiance?" Nalan Yeshing asked. "Both of us sensed its aura just now. It looked like High Radiance was going to decide the outcome of the battle, but it was instantly outshone as soon as Chen Pingan's flying sword appeared." Cui Wei replied with a wide smile. Hence, even though Qi Shou drew his sword, he conceded on the spot and sheathed his sword again before flying away. "What did you just say? Young Master Chen has to fight Peng Yuanji right after fighting Qi Shou?" Bai Lianshuang exclaimed, the elation on her face quickly turning to alarm. In contrast, Nalan Yeshing appeared very much at ease as he smiled and reassured, "We have nothing to worry about. Go and keep an eye on things," Bai Lianshuang ordered. "There's no need for that," Nalan Yeshing refused with a shake of his head. The fact that Chen Pingan was able to defeat Qi Shou shows that he knows what he's doing, and Peng Yuanji is really the one we should be feeling concerned for. He had to display the composure befitting a senior figure in the presence of his unofficial disciple, but at the same time, he was already prepared to flee should Bai Lianshuang lash out at him in fury at his refusal to comply with her demands. "Please go back and continue to keep an eye on things, Cui Wei," Bai Lianshuang requested. "If you feel like things are starting to go south, send a flying sword letter back to the Ning Manor right away." Cui Wei immediately departed atop his flying sword. On the Sword Qi Great Wall, sparring matches that took place between sword immortals were spectacular occasions that were not to be missed, but Cui Wei didn't feel like the battles between Chen Pingan and Qi Shou and Chen Pingan and Peng Yuanji were any less spectacular. Clearly, this was a popular opinion. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so many sword immortals of the upper 5 tiers spectating the battles. Furthermore, there were still more sword immortals flocking to the scene, and by Cui Wei's estimates, The final number of sword immortals to gather on that street was likely going to reach double figures. Back when Chao Ci was challenged when he first arrived on the Sword Qi Great Wall, barely any sword immortals had turned up to watch his battles. Of course, this was partially due to the fact that Chao Ci's cultivation base had still been rather lackluster at the time, and he had also defeated his opponents very quickly, but the point still stood. If one were to set aside all of those caveats and look solely at the number of spectating sword immortals on the scene, Chen Pingan was likely fast approaching a historic record. If only Master Ning and Mistress Yao were still around, Bai Lianshuang sighed, prompting Nalan Yeshing to heave a forlorn sigh of his own. She then gently dabbed at the tears that had welled up in her eyes as she smiled and self-reprimanded. I shouldn't be so greedy. Things are already great as they are now. There were 2 thatched cottages sitting atop the Sword Qi Great Wall, one large and one small, both in close proximity to one another. A fair-skinned young man emerged from the smaller of the 2 thatched cottages, then cast his gaze toward the city in the north as he smiled and asked, "Are you really not going to take a look, Senior Zhua? Even Lord Hidden Official has gone to join in on the fun." Seated with his legs crossed atop the city wall was a man with a sword sitting on his lap. His eyes were closed, and there were streaks of extremely formidable sword qi constantly swirling around him. Thankfully, the fair-skinned young man standing beside him was none other than sword immortal Wei Jin of the Wind Snow Temple. Otherwise, a lesser man would have already been torn to shreds, standing so close to his side. Wei Jin was considered to be the top prodigy of the Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, to have come after Li Tuanjing and before Ma Kuxuan. It was a ubiquitous opinion that Li Tuanjing's aptitude was not actually inferior to Wei Jin's. Unfortunately, his romantic troubles robbed him of any chance of becoming the first ever immortal tier swordsman in the history of the Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. Hence, on an overall basis he was still inferior to Wei Jin. As for Ma Kuxuan, it was widely believed in the cultivation world of the Eastern Treasured Vile Continent that his aptitude was slightly inferior to both Li Tuanjing and Wei Jin, but he was blessed with tremendous fortune at every turn, so perhaps he would ultimately ascend to even greater heights than Wei Jin. Of course, there was no point in comparing his potential future achievements to Li Tuanjing, seeing as the latter had already passed away. Zhuiyu's eyes remained closed as he scoffed in a cold voice. "There's nothing worth seeing. It's just a string of meaningless sparring matches." Wei Jin was familiar with Zhuiyu's personality, so he knew that he could be more frank and direct with him, and he smiled as he jibed. "This really isn't the attitude that a senior brother should have with his junior brother." "I've never acknowledged him as my junior brother," Zhuiyu replied with a shake of his head. According to Taoist traditions, a master and disciple relationship can only be officially established once one has offered up incense and kowtowed in an official master and disciple ceremony. Hence, he's technically not my junior brother anyway. Wei Jin didn't speak any further on the subject. Zhuiyu had always been a man of few words, and for him, it seemed like uttering even a single sentence was a much more arduous task than having to face an enemy in battle. Zhuiyu had come from the Middle Earth Divine Continent, while Wei Jin came from the Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. Zhuiyu had already been out of the public eye for over a century, drifting over the vast sea in a seemingly aimless manner the entire time, so there was really no connection between the two, aside from the fact that both of them were acquainted with Aoyang and Chen Pingan. Zhuiyu was quite fond of Wei Jin for both the latter's swordsmanship and personality, so Wei Jin was one of the very few swordsmen on the Sword Qi Great Wall that Zhuiyu was willing to speak to. In contrast with Zhuiyu, who had already reigned supreme at the top of this world for a long time, Wei Jin had only recently advanced to the unpolished jade tier, so he was very earnest and sincere when he referred to Zhuiyu as his senior. Every swordsman had a sword immortal that they admired the most in their heart. For example, Wei Jin's master from the Wind Snow Temple's divine platform had always admired Li Tuanjing for his ability to single-handedly keep Sunscorch Mountain in check. Wei Jin's master was never able to reach a particularly lofty cultivation base, but even so, he had Wei Jin's lifelong respect, and back when he was alive, his biggest wish was to be able to receive guidance from Li Tuanjing in his swordsmanship. Even if Li Tuanjing only spoke a single word to him on the subject, he would be content. Unfortunately, he always felt embarrassed by his own lowly cultivation base, so he was never able to muster up the courage to fulfill this lifelong wish. After Wei Jin emerged as a sword immortal from his stint of seclusion following his chance encounter with Aoyang, He intended to travel to the Wind Snow Temple to fulfill his master's wish in his stead, but by then Li Tuanjing had already passed away. This had always been a running theme in Wei Jin's life. Things that he didn't wish for would often come to him in abundance, whereas things that he sorely desired always seemed to pass him by, forever just out of reach. Thankfully, he had gained a new sense of perspective after coming to the Sword Qi Great Wall. Not only was this place home to the old Great Sword Immortal, who had already presided over the Sword Qi Great Wall for tens of thousands of years, there were also many fellow Sword Immortals who had come here from the northern Complete Reed continent, as well as seniors Yu, whose swordsmanship seemed to have been miles ahead of anyone else in the majestic world. Wei Jin had personally witnessed Yu in battle, venturing deep into the heart of the demon tribe's forces on his own. He didn't even have to draw his sword. The swirling sword qi around him was enough to destroy every enemy who dared to stand in his path. It was only when he encountered the great demon that he had picked out as his opponent did he finally get serious, and the battle between the two had resulted in immense collateral damage. Yu could hardly have cared less, considering there were only demon tribe warriors around him in a radius of dozens of kilometers at the time. His aura and flair on the battlefield had been unmatched, and his stunning performance in that battle instantly made him the most popular and revered outsider to all of the native swordsmen of the Sword Qi Great Wall. After the battle concluded, Yu had sat atop the city walls, drinking wine on his own. Chen Qingdu had appeared beside him before remarking, "Your swordsmanship is undeniably brilliant, but that alone is not enough." Yu's response was direct and concise. "Then that can only mean my swordsmanship is still not brilliant enough." After hearing his stubborn response, Chen Qingdu clasped his hands behind his back, then turned to depart as he shook his head and chuckled in amusement. The old scholar is renowned for his pragmatism and flexibility. I have no idea how a student of his could have become so inflexible and stubborn. Yu didn't bother to respond. The reason for this was very simple. He couldn't beat the old man in a battle. Otherwise, he would have let his sword do the talking and demanded that the old man display a bit more respect when speaking of the scholarly sage. Chen Pingan won his first battle easily, Wei Jin reported with a smile. His opponent was a Dragon Gate tier swordsman. Yu's eyes remained closed, but his brows furrowed slightly as he repeated, "A Dragon Gate tier swordsman?" Wei Jin thought that Yu had to have been expressing disdain at the lowly cultivation base of Chen Pingan's first opponent, so he added, "The second battle was against a Golden Core tier swordsman." To his surprise, Yu's brows furrowed even further as he mused to himself, "It's only been 10 years, yet he's already able to defeat a Dragon Gate tier swordsman?" Wei Jin didn't know what to say to that. How do you have so little confidence in your junior brother? However, Wei Jin then quickly recalled that back when Yu first became the scholarly sage's disciple, his cultivation base hadn't been anything special, nor was he considered to have had much aptitude for the sword. "You don't need to update me on the battles anymore," Yu said in an indifferent voice, so Wei Jin began spectating in silence. Meanwhile, Yu continued to refine his own sword intent using the almighty sword intent of the Sword Qi Great Wall. It was not a good thing for one to get distracted from their studies in their youth to pursue martial arts or swordsmanship. Once they had accumulated some life experience, it became difficult for them to absorb some of the more plain and simple principles presented in books. Instead, they would be constantly thinking about how they could better integrate themselves into the environment around them, picking and choosing different principles to use and abide by depending on their situation. Only the principles that were immediately applicable would be considered good and useful, while all other ones would be scoffed at and discarded. For the average person, there was nothing wrong with that, but over time it would inevitably make one more narrow-minded, and in Yu's eyes it was unacceptable for his teacher's student, particularly his final disciple, to go down such a path. After watching Chen Pingan's second battle, Wei Jin turned his attention back to Yu, and he could sense the latter's agitation, so he asked, "You're clearly still thinking about him, so why are you unwilling to even meet him?" "I already told you, I don't acknowledge him as my junior brother," Yu replied in a disgruntled manner. In his eyes, just because Chen Pingan was his teacher's disciple, and Qi Jingquan's junior brother didn't mean that Chen Pingan was automatically his junior brother by association. Similarly, Cui Chan was the scholarly sage's first disciple, yet Yu had never acknowledged him as his senior brother. Furthermore, what kind of junior brother would leave their senior brother hanging because he was too busy cuddling with his wife? Just because he didn't acknowledge Chen Pingan as his junior brother didn't mean that it was acceptable for Chen Pingan to disrespect him like this. Wei Jin continued to spectate in silence. All of a sudden, Zui Yu's eyes sprang open as he cast his gaze toward that street in the distance. Wei Jin had to suppress an amused smile. Zui Yu had opened his eyes in the very same instant that Qi Shou had drawn high radiance. However, Zui Yu then quickly closed his eyes again. And only then did Wei Jin allow himself an amused smile. Elsewhere on the Sword Qi Great Wall, the hidden official descended to the foot of the city walls, then stepped onto the wall and began walking up its surface. She didn't appear to have been walking very quickly, but she reached the top of the wall in the blink of an eye, and an elderly sword immortal from the northern Complete Reed Continent station nearby cupped his fist in a respectful salute. The hidden official gave the old sword immortal a nod of acknowledgement. She was standing on the northern section of the city walls, but with just a single stride, she arrived on the section of the city walls near the southern battlefield. From there, she grabbed onto her pigtails before lifting them up, and she began to slowly ascend as if she were hoisting herself up into the air. All of a sudden, her brows furrowed slightly as a displeased look appeared on her face, and she shot down like a speeding arrow toward a certain section of the city walls. All of the clouds above her were instantly scattered, and in the blink of an eye, she appeared beside a thatched cottage before asking in a disgruntled voice, "What do you want?" "I didn't drink any wine, so I didn't break the rules. I wanted to discuss something with you," an old man said with his hands clasped behind his back and a smile on his face. "I'm not going to the south," the hidden official snapped. "I haven't had any wine to drink, so I don't have the strength to fight. How are you going to get married in the future if you're so naughty and disobedient?" the old man asked with an amused smile. The loose-fitting black robe worn by the hidden official had drifted up slightly like a black cloud around her, and she was glowering up at the old man with a look of murderous rage. As it turned out, the old man had already arrived by her side as he spoke, then bent down to press a hand onto the top of her little head. All of a sudden, her black robe fell slack, and she ducked her head out from under the old man's hand as she stepped away and snapped, "What do you want to discuss with me? Hurry up. I don't have all day." "It's nothing. You can go play now," the old man said with a dismissive wave. "Chun Qingdu, do you think this is funny?" The hidden official raged. "What if I do?" Chun Qingdu asked with an amused smile. "It sounds like you're not very happy with me." The hidden official's expression instantly darkened. All of a sudden, a small world appeared over the section of the Sword Qi Great Wall near the thatched cottage without any warning. All of the swordsmen stationed atop the city walls instantly felt the ground beneath their feet shudder. Inside the small world, Chun Qingdu had pressed a hand down onto the hidden official's head once again. The latter had been lifted up into the air, with her feet suspended above the ground and her back against the city wall. Her entire body was radiating fierce killing intent, yet she was unable to struggle free from Chun Qingdu's grasp. "I haven't been doing much to keep you all in check, but that's only because I feel somewhat indebted to you, not because I lack the power to do so, so don't get it twisted," Chun Qingdu said in an indifferent voice. "I'm particularly tolerant of you because you're still young and immature, but that doesn't mean you should push your luck with me, understood?" The hidden official was silent for a long while, then nodded in response. Chun Qingdu released her, allowing her to slide to the ground, then dismissed once again. "You can go play now." The hidden official turned and swaggered away, swinging her baggy sleeves up and down as she walked. Chun Qingdu smiled as he cast his gaze toward the savage world in the south, then turned his gaze back to the north. Even though Chen Pingan was no longer able to use his talismans to gather information, he still had 15th, Pine Needle, and Lightning Devourer to help him accomplish that objective. The two Pang Yuanjis on the street didn't seem to be having any trouble. One of them had stopped in his tracks and was controlling 3 streaks of sword chi to combat Chen Pingan's 3 flying swords, while the other was presiding over the sword formation, forcing Chen Pingan to throw punches without pause, constantly expending his true chi and fist intent in the process. As for the 12 Pang Yuanji on the rooftops, they had begun creating a new formation. Pang Yuanji had chosen to adopt the most steady and straightforward approach, aiming to slowly transform the entire street into his own small world. If he could pull this off, Then he would be like a sage presiding over an academy or a deity presiding over a mountain, artificially enhancing his own cultivation base to the nascent tier, at which point the outcome of the battle would be nothing more than a foregone conclusion. At this point, Chen Pingan had clearly seen through Pang Yuanji's intentions, but unfortunately, it seemed like he was powerless to do anything about it as he already had his hands full dealing with the pervasive river of sword qi around him. Every single clash between his fist aura and Pang Yuanji's sword qi resembled a violent explosion, and the entire street had already been completely pulverized. However, there seemed to have been an unspoken understanding between the two combatants, and no matter how violent their clashes became, they ensured that none of their sword qi and fist aura escaped into the nearby wine shops. Right as Pang Yuanji was about to successfully establish his small world, Chen Pingan finally made his move, putting his full power on display as he tore through the river of sword qi with his fists to arrive before the Pang Yuanji in front of him in the blink of an eye. At the same time, a dazzling white flying sword had abruptly appeared out of nowhere, hurtling directly toward the Pang Yuanji behind Chen Pingan, who was busy warding off the latter's 3 flying swords. Simultaneously, Chen Pingan's soul sprang out of his body, then rose up into the heavens and instantly destroyed one of the Pang Yuanjis on a nearby rooftop with a single punch, while a second Pang Yuanji was cut down by first. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan's soul drew to a halt, and from its aerial vantage point, it channeled the rain evaporation technique to send a barrage of fist aura raining down from the heavens, targeting every single one of the remaining Pang Yuanjis on the rooftops. Meanwhile, Chen Pingan's physical body on the street below had already withdrawn his fist, and a burst of unprecedented fist intent erupted out of his body amid an almighty rumble akin to a deafening thunderclap. The entire street beneath his feet instantly collapsed and sank downward, and in the blink of an eye, he had already ascended above his own soul before throwing a punch in a certain direction, the most devastating punch of his entire life to date. A burst of almighty fist intent tore through the sky above the city like a knife slicing through paper, and Pang Yuanji abruptly appeared out of thin air, standing directly in the path of Chen Pingan's fist. In the face of the oncoming barrage of fist aura, he instantly withdrew all of his sword qi, condensing it around himself to conjure up a Dao manifestation that stood at several dozen feet tall. The Dao manifestation wasn't particularly massive or imposing, but it appeared extremely dense and resilient, and it crossed its arms to form a protective barrier in front of Pang Yuanji. Both Pang Yuanji and his Dao manifestation were sent flying back even higher into the sky by the force of Chen Pingan's blow, and by the time Pang Yuanji steadied himself, his Dao manifestation had already swelled to several hundred feet tall, standing behind him like a radiant golden mountain with one hand held in a Taoist seal and a giant sword in the other. As opposed to stepping back in retreat, Chen Pingan charged directly upward at an alarming speed in the face of the mighty Dao manifestation, using 1st and 15th as alternating steps to support his ascension. All the while, countless astonished spectators were looking on from down below, gawking up in a slack-jawed manner. Never had they imagined that they would be treated to such a spectacular show. "You should tell him to stop, Ningyao," Yanzhua urged in a concerned voice. "There's no need to go any further than this. If it were Qi Shou in Pang Yuanji's place, then I'd want nothing more than to see Chen Pingan split his head open. But Pang Yuanji isn't a bad guy, and at this rate at least one of them is going to end up dead." "He wouldn't listen to me," Ningyao snapped. Dong Huafu was astonished to hear this, stunned by the notion that there could exist someone under the heavens who would refuse to listen to Ningyao. Even the likes of Aoyang and the old great sword immortal had always thought very highly of Ningyao, and despite her young age, she had a very mature head on her shoulders, so neither of them had ever regarded her as a child. At the moment, she was the only one in their circle of friends who was taken seriously enough by Aoyang and the old great sword immortal to be able to discuss important matters with them. Even Dong Butte had personally conceded that she was far inferior to Ningyao in this regard. "Maybe he'll listen to me, but I don't want to get involved," Ningyao amended, and Dong Huafu was very relieved to hear this. That was what he expected to hear from his big sister Ning, whom he knew and loved. Pang Yuanji raised a hand up high before swinging it down forcefully, and the enormous Dao manifestation behind him mirrored his movements, raising the hand that was clasped into a Taoist lightning seal before sending it crashing down like a small mountain. However, Chen Pingan's fist was able to break through the lightning seal, and it still had power left over to continue hurtling toward Pang Yuanji. Pang Yuanji remained composed as he joined his middle and index fingers before swiping them through the air, and the Dao manifestation behind him slashed its sword horizontally through the air, sending it crashing into Chen Pingan's waist with tremendous force. Chen Pingan planted his feet into the air below him to avoid being swatted back down to earth by the oncoming giant sword. Instead, he was only forced around 100 feet to the side by the blade of the sword, and as soon as the power behind the giant sword began to run out, he immediately continued his ascension as he threw another punch with his left fist. All of the spectating swordsmen at or below the golden core tier were utterly astonished by Chen Pingan's absurd physical durability. Once again, the Dao manifestation sent its lightning seal and giant sword crashing down upon Chen Pingan, but he vanished from the spot twice in succession to evade the oncoming attacks, and all of a sudden, he had risen up above Pang Yuanji's true body before throwing a punch down at his head. Pang Yuanji plummeted out of the sky before smashing a massive crater into the street, raising an enormous cloud of dust and debris in the process. Meanwhile, Chen Pingan slowly descended onto the street with his two flying swords beneath his feet. His left arm was hanging limply by his side, and needless to say, his right arm was in even worse condition. He landed right next to Sword Immortal, and as he stood at the edge of the massive crater, his entire body covered in blood, he turned his gaze to Ningyao in the distance. He rested the palm of his completely stripped skeletal hand down onto the hilt of Sword Immortal, using it as a crutch as he flashed her a radiant smile. Pang Yuanji slowly emerged from the bottom of the crater, making no effort to shake off the dust and debris clinging to his body and his clothes. He and Chen Pingan exchanged a glance with each other, and he gave Chen Pingan a nod before passing him on his way back to the wine shop where he had been drinking earlier. All of a sudden he seemed to have recalled something and he loudly declared, "My apologies to everyone who bet money on me. In order to make amends, I would like to tell you all that your losses have nothing to do with me. You made the bets of your own volition, so you'll have to handle the consequences of your decision yourselves." After his voice trailed off, Pang Yuanji clasped a hand over his own mouth, then shook it aside to send some blood splattering down onto the ground. Upon his return to the wine shop, he was handed a bowl of wine by Sword Immortal Gao Kuei, while Sword Immortal Yuan Qingshu of the Southern World Continent merely smiled at him in silence. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Pang Yuanji said in a resigned manner. "It's fine," Gao Kuei replied. "It's just a loss. What doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. You did much better than Qishou at least," Yuan Qingshu chimed in with a nod of approval. As Pang Yuanji turned his gaze back to the street, he discovered that Chen Pingan and the others were already long gone. Yanzhua had pulled out a small trinket that had transformed into a luxurious, full-sized carriage, and he and his friends had departed in the carriage. Inside the spacious carriage, Chen Pingan was seated with his legs crossed, with Ningyao sitting next to him. Sword Immortal had already flown back to the Ning Manor on its own. Yanzhua took up a lot of room and he was sitting across from Chen Sanqiu, Dong Huafu and Daizhang. The silence was a little awkward, but no one seemed to know what to say. "There's medicine in the Ning Manor that can regrow flesh and skin, right?" Chen Pingan asked. Ningyao nodded in response. Yanzhua took a glance at Chen Pingan's unsightly arm as he asked, "Does that not hurt?" No one in the carriage was a stranger to injuries. In fact, Daizhang had had an arm cleanly chopped off by a demon. However, they had never seen anyone look so composed and unbothered after suffering injuries as horrific as Chen Pingan's. "It doesn't hurt too bad," Chen Pingan replied with a smile. "Having said that, it's going to be a bit of a pain getting rid of the residual sword chi from time and jumping spider in my body." "Don't talk," Ningyao instructed. Chen Pingan did as he was told, closing his eyes to rest. Upon their return to the Ning Manor, Bai Lianshuang and Nailin Yexing were already waiting at the entrance. Even for a mountain summit tier martial artist like Bai Lianshuang, who had regularly subjected herself to immense physical torment in her past training, the sight of Chen Pingan's terrible injuries had her wincing in sympathy. Nailin Yexing told Chen Pingan that he wouldn't help him expel the residual sword chi from Qishou and Pang Yuanji's flying swords, as he would stand to benefit from expelling the sword chi himself. This naturally suited Chen Pingan just fine. Bai Lianshuang took Chen Pingan to the Ning Manor's medicine room, while Ningyao and her 4 friends sat down in the pergola on the dragon-slaying cliff. Aside from Dong Huafu, who was still as airhead as ever, staring off into space in a daze, Yin Zhua and the others were all staring at each other, unsure of what to say. In a pure sparring match, Qishou would have come out on top had he gone all out from the very beginning instead of trying to show off and embarrass Chen Pingan, Ningyao began. In particular, if he had put more effort into bolstering his jumping spider sword formation to prevent Chen Pingan from getting close, his heartstring flying sword would have eventually been able to close in on Chen Pingan and put an end to the battle. In a long and drawn-out, Qishou definitely holds the advantage as Chen Pingan's true qi will run out long before the spiritual energy in Qishou's acupoints is exhausted. In a battle of life and death, both Chen Pingan and Peng Yuanji would have died. However, Chen Pingan was ultimately able to win those two hard-fought battles, not because he was lucky, but because he outsmarted Qishou and Peng Yuanji. He thought more extensively about his strategies and how he could use different factors to his advantage, so his plan was more complete and comprehensive. As a result, he was able to win as long as he could strike fast enough with his fists and his swords. Having said that, there's a big prerequisite to all of this, and that's that he's able to ward off their flying swords. If any of you had been in his place, you wouldn't have been able to win, no matter how extensively you planned in advance, because the gap in power between you and Peng Yuanji and Qishou is too much to overcome with strategy alone. If any of you were to face either of those two in battle, it would solely be a struggle for survival for you. On the southern battlefields, you're able to go into battle against the demon tribe without any fear or hesitation, so you're often able to overperform compared with your usual standards. That's a very good quality, but if your opponent were instead one of Peng Yuanji or Qishou, you would be weighed down by fear and timidity. Why? Among pure martial artists, there is a concept known as martial courage. In their words, they would say that your martial courage is lacking. The turning point in Chen Pingan's battle against Qishou was when Qishou first released Heartstring. In that instant, Chen Pingan sold him an illusion. He intentionally held himself back, refraining from displaying his full speed to make it appear as if he were struggling to outrun Heartstring, yet he still made sure to be just a bit faster than Flying Kite. Hence, after taking that first punch from Chen Pingan, Qishou immediately realized that Flying Kite was going to be largely useless for the rest of the battle. Even if it could speed up a little, it still wouldn't be able to catch up to Chen Pingan. On the surface, Qishou appeared very relaxed and graceful in battle, but the cost of putting on such an arrogant show was that he was squandering his own advantage bit by bit. Meanwhile, Chen Pingan continued to hold back until the very last moment, when he broke through the jumping spider sword formation with one punch before unleashing a second punch named the deity drumming technique. It's an all-out attack that aims to strike the opponent at all cost, even if it means incurring grievous injury to oneself, and it's the type of attack that Chen Pingan resorts to the most in battle. Yin Zhua and the others remained silent for the entire duration of Ning Yao's analysis, as if they were students listening to a lecture from their teacher. At this point, I'm sure it's become clear to all of you that from the very beginning of his battle against Qishou, Chen Pingan had been setting up for his battle against Peng Yuanji. Ning Yao continued. Yin Zhua, you've seen Chen Pingan use an inch movement talisman. During his two battles against Qishou and Peng Yuanji, he used inch movement talismans on 4 different occasions. So why is it that the effectiveness of the inch movement talismans varied so drastically from one battle to another? The reason for this is very simple. Even for the exact same talisman, their power and effectiveness can vary drastically depending on the material of the talisman paper used. This is common knowledge, and it certainly wouldn't have been something that Peng Yuanji failed to take into consideration. Everyone on the entire Sword Qi Great Wall knows how smart Peng Yuanji is. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been given the nickname of 100 Schools Peng. However, he was still tricked by Chen Pingan, and ultimately, it was the very same inch movement talisman that had played a pivotal role in deciding the outcome of the battle, allowing Chen Pingan to close the distance between them in one fell swoop before landing the finishing blow. Do you know why that is? It's because the 2 ordinary yellow paper inch movement talismans that Chen Pingan used in his battle against Qishou were specifically meant to be shown to Peng Yuanji. The most brilliant part of all of this is that during the first battle, the inch movement talismans were largely useless, having no bearing on the outcome of the battle. All of us instinctively tend to believe what we see with our eyes, and thus Peng Yuanji was unwittingly lulled into a false sense of complacency. If this were the only trap that Chen Pingan had set, then Peng Yuanji would have likely been vigilant enough to see through his ruse. However, Chen Pingan made sure to distract him with other red herrings, ones that seemed much more significant than the matter of the inch movement talismans, and as a result, Peng Yuanji's attention was immediately diverted elsewhere. For example, he noticed that Chen Pingan hadn't thrown any punches with his left hand throughout the entirety of his battle against Qishou, and he was also led to wonder if Chen Pingan still had additional flying swords up his sleeve. Yen Zhua and Chen Sanxiu exchanged a wry smile with each other, while Dai Zhang was beginning to feel the onset of a headache. Only after hearing Ning Yao's analysis did she come to realize just how much thought that Chen Pingan had put into those two battles, how many traps he had set, and how much consideration had gone into every single one of his punches. Initially, the four of them had been rather concerned at the prospect of Chen Pingan joining them in the next battle south of the Sword Qi Great Wall. Over time they had become a very cohesive and tight-knit unit, able to work together like a well-oiled machine, so they were worried that not only would the addition of Chen Pingan not prove to be an asset, but it would also disrupt their teamwork and have a detrimental effect. Clearly, they had severely underestimated Chen Pingan's tactical acumen. Meanwhile, Dong Huafu was already fretting over how he was going to deal with his sister and mother once he returned home. Ning Yao was silent for a moment, then smiled as she continued. From the very beginning, Chen Pingan knew why Dai Zhang and Dong Huafu staged a sparring match for him to see, and why Yen Zhua had openly provoked him. He knew that you were doing all of this out of concern for him, but clearly, none of you believed that he could win 3 battles in a row, and nothing that he said could have convinced you otherwise, so he could only let his fists do the talking. However, I know he appreciates what all of you have done for him. He's always been someone who treats kindness with gratitude. I bet you're all feeling both relieved and a little afraid of Chen Pingan, right? If someone as cunning and calculating as him decides to plot against any of you, then you must be screwed, right? I'm a little afraid, yeah, Chen Sanxiu conceded with a nod. You have nothing to fear, Ning Yao reassured with a shake of her head. Unless you somehow get on his bad side. Chen Pingan treats everyone with respect. If you're a mighty sword immortal, he will regard you with earnest admiration and reverence, but even if you're just a mortal with no cultivation base to speak of, he'll still treat you with a baseline level of respect. When it comes to Granny Bai and Grandpa Nalan, their status as senior figures of the Ning Manor is far more important to Chen Pingan than the fact that they were once a 10th-tier martial artist and an immortal-tier sword immortal, respectively. What's most important to him is that they're my seniors, and that they've been protecting me from the day I was born. This means that even if Granny Bai and Grandpa Nalan were just a pair of ordinary old people, he would still treat them with the same level of respect and gratitude. Similarly, he regards all of you as close friends of mine and comrades who've had my back through life and death. Only after that does he consider other things about you, such as how Yen Zhua and Chen Sanxiu are the young masters and likely heirs of the Yen clan and the Chen clan, how Dai Zhang is a strong and independent girl who runs her own general goods shop, how Dong Huafu is a well-intentioned airhead who doesn't like to talk much. Right at this moment, Ning Yao's voice trailed off as Chen Pingan approached the group from afar. He had changed into a clean Dao robe that Granny Bai had found for him, and both of his hands were concealed up his sleeves as he made his way onto the dragon-slaying cliff. His complexion was a little pale, but he appeared energetic and in high spirits as he sat down beside Ning Yao before smiling as he asked, "You weren't talking about me just now, were you?" Dong Huafu nodded in response, and he was just about to say something when Ning Yao shot him a warning glare and interrupted. "Didn't I just say that you don't like to talk much?" Dong Huafu immediately closed his mouth again. Chen Pingan raised his left hand to reveal 2 land-shortening talismans, one yellow and one golden. Yen Zhua's eyes widened in shock, but not at the talismans. Instead, it was the fact that Chen Pingan was able to easily raise his left arm. When back on the street earlier, it had hung limply by his side like a wet rag. After stowing away the pair of talismans, Chen Pingan smiled as he revealed, "I didn't go all out with my final punch, so the injuries I sustained to my left arm weren't actually all that severe." Funnily enough, Peng Yuanji also intentionally stayed at the bottom of the crater for a bit longer than he actually had to before coming out. Both of us were putting on a show at the end. I didn't want to truly fight Peng Yuanji to the death because I'm certain that he also had some powerful trump cards that he hadn't revealed. So I only came out with the win because Peng Yuanji conceded the victory to me. My power and raw combat prowess on their own wouldn't have been enough to secure the victory against Qishou and Peng Yuanji. Instead, I also had to rely heavily on strategy and the rules of the Sword Chi Great Wall, and only then was I fortunate enough to be able to come out on top. All of the spectating sword immortals are aware of this, and they could tell that just because I had defeated Qishou and Pang Yuanji didn't necessarily mean that I was superior to them. Thus, even though I won, my victories haven't truly damaged the reputations of the Qi clan and the hidden official, and that's how I can ensure that I'll be safe from retaliation. His fists and swords had to be fast and precise, but also measured and thoughtful. You don't have to reveal all of your secrets to us, Chen Sancho said with a smile. This isn't something that I have to keep secret from all of you, Chen Pingan replied with a shake of his head. If I had told you all of this before I left the Ning Manor, none of you would have believed me, and you would have likely thought that I was spouting a bunch of nonsense to make myself look good. Personally, I don't really care how you see me, but your opinion of me will also affect how you see Ning Yao, so I chose not to say anything. As for why I'm willing to reveal all of this to you, it's simple. Because all of you are Ning Yao's friends. I trust Ning Yao, so I trust all of you as well. That may be a bit upsetting for you to hear, but it's the truth. That's not upsetting to hear at all, Yanzhua argued. I don't know about anyone else, but your sincerity warms the cockles of my heart, like having some wine on a cold winter day. I'm afraid I won't be able to drink anytime soon, Chen Pingan said with a smile. My injuries are pretty severe, so I'll have to focus on rest and recovery for at least half a month or so. You look pretty energetic and talkative right now, Ning Yao scoffed. Are you planning to fight Gao Yeho as well? I don't mean to brag, but if Gao Yeho had shown up, then I'm confident I would have been able to handle him, Chen Pingan said with a smile. He's the easiest of the three to deal with, and I would have had no trouble against him, whether it be in a sparring match or a battle to the death. Honestly, Qishou, Pang Yuanji, and Gao Yeho would have been the ideal order for me to win 3 battles in a row, so it's actually a real shame that Gao Yeho didn't make an appearance. Yanzhua was feeling a little weak in the knees, while Chen Sancho had no idea what to say. Dong Huafu felt like only a man like Chen Pingan was worthy of Ning Yao, and Dai Zhang was also very happy for her. Ning Yao trod firmly down onto the back of Chen Pingan's foot before digging in her heel and giving it a twist. I'm sorry, I surrender, I'll shut up, Chen Pingan immediately conceded with a smile. All right, let's all get out of here and leave Chen Pingan to recover in peace, Chen Sancho said with a smile. Oh, by the way, feel free to come and visit the Chen Manor if you get the chance, Chen Pingan. I'd advise against visiting the Dong Manor, Dong Huafu said with a sigh. If you do, my mother and my sister will annoy you to death. I guarantee you they'll be even more of a pain to deal with than Pang Yuanji. Chen Pingan stood up with a smile and a parting nod, yet right as Yanzhua and the others were about to leave, Bai Lianshuang arrived at the foot of the dragon-slaying cliff with an amused smile on her face as she reported. Lu Duan came by earlier and told me that she wanted to become young Master Chen's disciple and have him teach her martial arts. She told me that if young Master Chen refused, then she would kneel in front of the Ning Manor until he changed his mind. She looked quite sincere and determined, and she bought a bunch of pastries on the way here. Thankfully, Ms. Dong came by to drag her away, but given how stubborn Lu Duan can be when she sets her mind on something, I have a feeling this won't be the last we see of her. Yanzhua and Chen Sancho exchanged a look of schadenfreude with each other upon hearing this. They were both familiar with Lu Duan, and they knew that she was renowned for being a pain to deal with. Next time she comes, just drag her in here, and I'll give her a beating. That should teach her. Ning Yao harumphed. Chen Pingan didn't say anything. After Chen Sancho and the others left the Yao Manor, they decided to go drinking at a wine shop that they regularly frequented instead of parting ways and returning home. In the wake of their departure, Chen Pingan and Ning Yao were the only ones left in the pergola. I'm fine, Chen Pingan reassured in a gentle voice. You don't have to worry about me. Ning Yao gave a cold harumph. Chen Pingan leaned back against the railing, then raised his head as he remarked, I really do like it here a lot. Ning Yao gently lifted Chen Pingan's right sleeve to examine the condition of his arm, then reprimanded. Don't be so reckless from now on. No matter how confident you are in your abilities, there's always a chance that something could go wrong. And in the heat of battle, even just a single misstep can have irreversible consequences. After releasing his sleeve, she asked, Are you really not going to see Zuoyu? Chen Pingan thought about it for a moment then replied, I'll go visit the old great sword immortal first. It's still unclear if Senior Zhua is even willing to see me. A meeting with Grandpa Chan seems fairly innocuous, but in reality, it's going to be the most perilous test of all, and you could easily do something unnecessary if you're not careful, so make sure to approach this with the utmost caution, Ningyao warned. Chen Pingan nodded in response. When are you going to the Sword Qi Great Wall? Ningyao asked. There's no hurry, Chen Pingan replied with a smile. If I go too early, it'll be a slap to the face for Peng Yuanji and Qishou, and especially their seniors. Why bother to consider all of that? Ningyao asked with slightly furrowed brows. You said it yourself. The Sword Qi Great Wall is a very straightforward place where you don't have to overthink things. They brought this embarrassment upon themselves, and you earned those victories fair and square. Force of habit, Chen Pingan replied. If you think this is an undesirable trait, then I can change. There's only one thing that I refuse to compromise on, but I'm willing to change in everything else. That one thing that I won't compromise on and my willingness to change and adapt in everything else are the qualities that have allowed me to reach where I am today. Ningyao took a glance at Chen Pingan, who was sitting on her left, and he immediately stood up before sitting back down on her right. Ningyao didn't say anything. Chen Pingan gently held onto her hand, and he also didn't say anything as he closed his eyes. 3 days later, Chen Pingan departed from the Ning Manor under the cover of night, traveling to the Sword Qi Great Wall on his own. After arriving before the pair of familiar thatched cottages, he stowed his talismanic boat up his sleeve as he smiled and greeted. Junior Chen Pingan pays his respects to the old great sword immortal. Chen Qingdu was standing atop the city wall, and he gave a pleased nod as he mused. Not seeking petty gains from the world is an important quality for a cultivator's ascension to greater heights. I'm assuming you're here to discuss some official business with me, seeing as you haven't brought little Ning with you. There were 2 things that Chen Pingan wished to discuss with Chen Qingdu, and he didn't quite know which one he should begin with. Let's chat as we walk. Whatever it is you have to say, go right ahead, Chen Qingdu encouraged with a smile. Chen Pingan hesitated momentarily, then asked, Have you already seen that outcome, Senior Chen? I have, Chen Qingdu replied with a nod. I'm calculating the time. Have you never considered taking all of the swordsmen here back to the majestic world? Chen Pingan asked. Of course I have, Chen Qingdu replied with a smile. All of the color was instantly drained from Chen Pingan's face. Over all of the years that I've spent on the Sword Qi Great Wall, I've met some very interesting outsiders and young people, Chen Qingdu said. The most recent one is Zhua Yu, whose swordsmanship is as fine as any I've ever seen. Then there was Chao Xiai a few years ago, and before him came Aoyang. If we go back even further, there was Chan Chunan of the southern world continent, and before him was a certain scholar from the Middle Earth divine continent. At the time, he was still at the peak of his powers and hadn't suffered his fall from grace. There were a few before him as well, and in total I'd say there are about 10. Every time I met one such individual, I would become a little less disappointed in the majestic world. However, there are still far too few of them and too far in between to make up for all of the disappointing people and things in the majestic world. The founding father of the foretellers in the majestic world once came to me, and you could say that he issued a challenge of sorts. He was young and brash, and as is often the case with young men, he had very lofty aspirations and made some very grand statements. Some principles that he viewed to be above all others and would remain unshakable regardless of how the state of the world changed over time were actually quite naive in my eyes. However, some of the things that he said unintentionally were quite promising, and as time passed, those words became more and more impactful and became more and more deeply rooted in the world. He had no idea of the future impact of those errant remarks at the time, but that turned out to be a good thing, as it was precisely his lack of intention that allowed for the positive outcomes to follow. One of the most powerful leaders of the demon tribe once made a proposal for my consideration. Would you care to guess what it was? My guess is that the proposal was to hand over the savage world to the Sword Qi Great Wall, while the majestic world fell into the hands of the demon tribe in exchange, Chen Pingan said. Chen Qingdu didn't seem surprised at all that Chen Pingan had guessed the answer correctly, and he asked, Why do you think I refused? According to the terms that they proposed, all that the swordsmen of our Sword Qi Great Wall would have to do would be to allow the demon tribe into the majestic world. From there, they would be responsible for conquering the majestic world on their own, and we wouldn't even have to help them in their conquest. That's precisely the most cunning and devious element of their proposal, Chen Pingan said. As soon as the Sword Qi Great Wall agrees to the proposal, there will immediately be mass conflict and division among its swordsmen. Those who harbor enmity toward the majestic world will be pitted against those who are still inclined to defend the majestic world, and the resulting conflict will result in widespread casualties. Perhaps the Sword Qi Great Wall will ultimately be able to take over the savage world, but what remains of its forces would definitely not be enough to hold on to such a vast territory for long. Eventually, the remaining demons in the savage world would unite for an uprising, while all of the swordsmen will only have grown complacent over time. With no reason to keep their swords sharp, their sword intent will slowly be whittled away over extended periods of peace and complacency, and in the end, the demon tribe will eventually regain control of the savage world. That is, unless you're willing to constantly keep an eye on the savage world, striking down any demon as soon as they reach the upper 5 tiers to avoid allowing them to grow into a true threat. If I were the leader of the demon tribe who raised that proposal, I wouldn't even make you sign an agreement or anything like that. Instead, I would simply allow you to eliminate the upper 5 tiers demons as you please. Over time, you will become more and more mentally exhausted by the task of having to constantly keep a close eye on the entire savage world. Perhaps your sword will still remain sharp, but you will eventually become too weary to draw it, and that's when the demon tribe will rise up and reclaim the savage world. That was very well said, Chen Qingdu praised with a nod. Chen Pingan carefully mulled over his words as he continued. That's only the reason behind why you personally turned down the proposal. You're accustomed to looking at the bigger picture and looking far into the future, thousands, even tens of thousands of years down the line. In order to ensure a true sense of purity and objectivity, you've even intentionally distanced yourself from your own clan. However, everyone else outside of yourself has their own selfish desires. The selfish desires that I'm referring to here have nothing to do with good or evil. Instead, they are simply a part of human nature. Even the sages of the 3 teachings stationed here are not insusceptible to these selfish desires, let alone the swordsmen of the Sword Qi Great Wall, and those on the Sword Qi Great Wall dealing with people from Stalactite Mountain and the majestic world. If it isn't for all of the swordsmen from the northern Complete Reed continent and other outsiders from the majestic world who've come here to oppose the demon tribe of their own volition, you may not have been able to keep up the morale and cohesion of everyone on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Once again, that was very well said, Chen Qingdu replied with a nod. You give me far too much credit, Senior Chen, Chen Pingan said in a modest fashion. I'm only saying whatever's coming to my mind, yet you're the one who's actually been performing all of these grand feats, and you've been doing so for tens of thousands of years. Chen Qingdu chuckled. You're even more of a flatterer than Aoyang. Chen Pingan didn't know what to say to that. I will personally serve as your official matchmaker in your bid to secure little Ning's hand in marriage, Chen Qingdu said. I haven't even made the request yet, Senior Chen, Chen Pingan said with an embarrassed expression. Are you embarrassed? Chen Qingdu asked with an amused smile. Not at all. Chen Pingan replied with a vigorous shake of his head. What's there to be embarrassed about? As expected of that impoverished scholar's final disciple, you've clearly learned much from him, Chen Qingdu praised with a nod of approval. He then gave Chen Pingan a dismissive wave as he continued. Little Ning has followed you here in secret. I'll get out of your way so you two can have some alone time. Chen Pingan was silent for a moment, then extended his heavily bandaged right arm out of his sleeve before cupping his fist and extending a deep bow as he said, If I may be so bold, I would like to offer my sincerest gratitude and admiration to you on behalf of the majestic world. All right, that's enough flattery from you. Chen Qingdu chuckled as he swept a sleeve through the air, and even though Sword Immortal was now already a celestial sword, it was still forced out of its scabbard, then instantly tore through the fabric of space to arrive atop the city wall. Chen Qingdu casually grabbed the celestial sword by the hilt, then joined the middle and index fingers of his other hand before slowly tracing them along the length of its blade, following which he smiled and said, It won't do to have the conflicting energies in the sword constantly at odds with each other, so I've made an executive decision to resolve this problem for you. Chen Qingdu held onto the sword for a while longer with his fingers pressed against its tip, then casually tossed it aside, instantly returning it to its scabbard in the Ning manner. All the while, Chen Pingan had been looking on in a dumbfounded silence. With his hands clasped behind his back, Chen Qingdu turned to depart as he said, "You can go now. Be a bit braver." Ning Yao and Chen Pingan were walking side by side atop the Sword Qi Great Wall. Ning Yao held the jade tablet up high, watching it shimmer under the moonlight. The characters for peace and safety were engraved on the tablet's face, making it the most literal peace and safety tablet under the heavens. She turned the tablet around, and on the other side was engraved the words, "My thoughts are pure." She continued to hold the tablet high above her own head, looking up at it as she walked along, and she casually asked, "What did you talk about with Senior Chen?" Chen Pingan walked along by her side as he replied, "The old greatsword immortal told me to be a bit braver. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that." Ning Yao immediately stopped in her tracks, then lowered the jade tablet in her hand, gently tapping it against Chen Pingan's forehead as she accused, "Since when did you become so brazen and shameless?" All of a sudden, Chen Pingan turned around so that his back was facing Ning Yao, then squatted down and patted his own back. Back at the immortal tomb in the Jewel's small world, Ning Yao had once carried him on her back, and he was now returning the favor. Ning Yao looked away with a disdainful expression, but the tips of her ears were bright red. Chen Pingan remained crouched down as he chuckled. "So there are things that even you're afraid to do after all." In the end, Chen Pingan won, and he slowly walked along with Ning Yao on his back. Under the moonlight, Chen Pingan was walking along as carefully as if he were carrying the entire world on his back. All of a sudden, Ning Yao's face turned bright red, and she pinched Chen Pingan's ear before giving it a vicious twist as she yelled, "Chen Pingan!" Chen Pingan yelped in pain as he hurriedly cocked his head to the side. Ning Yao gave him a knock on the back of the head, then threatened in fury and embarrassment, "I'm really going to get angry if you keep this up." All right, I won't do it again," Chen Pingan replied in a pitiful tone. All of a sudden, a stern-looking old man appeared atop the city wall, and he demanded, "Put her down." Chen Pingan faltered slightly upon hearing this, then snapped, "Who do you think you are? Mind your own business." "He's my grandfather," Ning Yao said in a quiet voice. A sheepish look appeared on Chen Pingan's face, and he was just about to set Ning Yao down when another stern voice rang out from nearby. "Don't listen to him." Zui Yu had arrived on the scene without warning, and he immediately repeated the same question to the old man. "Who do you think you are?" He and Chen Pingan were truly both disciples of the scholarly sage.